Millionaire cries as street kid rescues his blind daughter. "Sir, you're the one who kidnapped her," the boy said. "Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the journey." The rain hammered against the windows of Sterling Industries as thunder rolled across the Chicago skyline. Inside the gleaming boardroom, billionaire Robert Sterling reviewed his company's quarterly reports. At 45, he had built a business empire worth $4 billion. But his most precious treasure wasn't stored in any bank vault. It was his 8-year-old daughter Lily, who was born without sight but saw the world through a heart filled with pure joy. "Mr. Sterling." His secretary's panicked voice crackled through the intercom. "Emergency call from Lily's school." Robert's blood turned to ice. Lily never caused problems at Oakwood Academy. She was the sweetest child, loved by everyone despite her blindness. "This is Robert Sterling," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Mr. Sterling, this is Principal Johnson. I'm calling about a terrible incident. Lily never made it to school today. We found your driver unconscious next to your car just 3 blocks away." The phone crashed to the floor. Robert's successful world, the meetings, the million-dollar deals, became meaningless in that single moment. "Sir," his assistant called out, "should I cancel your meetings?" Robert was already grabbing his coat with shaking hands. "Cancel everything. My daughter is missing." The drive to the scene felt like forever. Police cars lined the street, their flashing lights painting the gray morning in scary colors. Detective Maria Santos walked up to him immediately, her face serious and sad. "Mr. Sterling, we found your car abandoned. Your driver has a head injury, but he'll be okay. He can't remember anything after picking up Lily from your house." Robert's legs almost gave out. Lily, his sweet little girl who trusted everyone, who couldn't see danger coming. She was somewhere out there, scared and alone. "Robert!" A familiar voice called out. David Martinez, his business partner and best friend for 20 years, came running toward him through the rain. "I heard what happened. What can I do to help?" David wrapped Robert in a supportive hug, his face full of worry. "We'll find her, Robert. Promise you that. I'm putting everything I have into this search." Standing together in the pouring rain, Robert felt a small bit of comfort. At least he wasn't facing this nightmare alone. But across the city, in a rotting abandoned building, Lily sat in a dark basement. Her small hands were tied, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "Daddy, please find me." 3 days passed since Lily's disappearance. The Sterling mansion had turned into a war room of organized chaos. FBI agents filled the dining room, their computers and phones creating constant noise. Maps of Chicago covered every wall, marked with red pins showing search areas. Robert hadn't slept since that first phone call. His usually perfect appearance had fallen apart. Stubble covered his face, his expensive shirt was wrinkled, and his eyes were red from exhaustion and crying. He paced from room to room like a trapped animal, taking calls from police, working with private investigators, and desperately following every clue. "Any word from the kidnapper?" Detective Santos asked, looking at the latest reports. "Nothing," Robert replied, his voice breaking. "They called twice demanding money. But I won't pay a cent until I have proof Lily is alive and safe." David appeared in the doorway, mud splattered on his expensive suit from another day of searching. "Robert, we've covered the entire downtown area. My team is moving to the warehouse district tomorrow." Robert gripped his friend's shoulder gratefully. "Thank you, David. I don't know what I'd do without you leading these searches." "She's like a niece to me," David replied, his eyes filled with emotion. "I won't rest until we bring her home." Meanwhile, across the city, under the Roosevelt Bridge, 12-year-old Jake Williams huddled in his cardboard shelter. The bridge had been his home for 2 years, ever since his mother died from drugs, leaving him with no family and nowhere to go. He'd learned to survive on the streets, finding food in dumpsters, avoiding dangerous adults, and staying invisible. But tonight felt different. For the past 3 days, Jake had noticed strange activity around the old Preston warehouse just 2 blocks from his bridge. Black cars came and went at weird hours, and twice he'd seen men in suits carrying bags into the building. Jake's survival instincts were sharp. He'd learned to recognize when adults were up to no good, and everything about the Preston warehouse screamed danger. As rain began falling again, Jake pulled his thin jacket tighter and stared through the darkness at the building. A light flickered in a basement window, a window he'd never seen lit before. And then he heard it, carried on the wind. A sound that made his blood run cold. Someone was crying. Child was crying. Jake's bare feet made no sound as he crept through the shadows toward the warehouse. 2 years of street life had taught him to move like a ghost, invisible, silent, and always ready to run. The crying grew louder as he got closer to the basement window. It was definitely a child, and the sound broke something inside Jake's hardened 12-year-old heart. Pressing his face against the dirty glass, Jake peered into the dim basement. What he saw made his stomach twist with anger. A small girl sat huddled in the corner, her hands tied behind her back, tears streaming down her dirty face. She wore an expensive school uniform, now torn and stained. "Hey!" Jake whispered through the window. The girl's head turned toward his voice, her unseeing eyes wide with fear. "Don't be scared," he said softly. "I'm going to help you." Jake had been watching the building long enough to know the pattern. Every evening around sunset, the two men left for about an hour, probably to get food. He waited in the shadows, his heart pounding, until he saw them drive away. The basement door was locked, but Jake had learned to pick simple locks from other street kids. His fingers worked quickly in the darkness until he heard the satisfying click. "It's okay," he whispered as he entered the basement. "I'm Jake. I'm here to help you." The girl couldn't be more than 8 or 9. She shrank back against the wall. "Please don't hurt me," she whimpered. "Never," Jake promised, carefully approaching her. "I'm going to untie you, okay? Then we're getting out of here." As he worked on the ropes, Jake noticed something strange. The girl's eyes didn't follow his movements. They stared straight ahead. "Can you see me?" he asked gently. "No," she whispered. "I'm blind. I can't see anything." Jake's heart ached for her. Being trapped and scared was terrible enough, but being unable to see made it so much worse. "What's your name?" he asked, freeing her hands. "Lily," she replied, rubbing her wrists where the ropes had hurt her. "Okay, Lily. I know a safe place where those bad men can't find you. Can you walk?" Lily nodded, reaching out carefully. Jake took her small hand in his, feeling how cold and fragile she was. "I'm going to take care of you," he promised. "Trust me." Under the Roosevelt Bridge, Jake's cardboard shelter had never housed anyone but himself. Tonight was different. He carefully helped Lily settle onto his only blanket, then surrounded her with pieces of cardboard to block the cold wind that swept off the river. "I'm sorry it's not very warm," Jake said, taking off his jacket and putting it over her small shoulders. "But it's safe here. Nobody ever comes down here at night." Lily pulled the jacket closer. Despite living on the streets, Jake kept himself as clean as possible, washing his clothes in the river when he could. "Are you hungry?" Jake asked, getting a paper bag from his hiding spot behind a concrete post. Inside were 2 sandwiches he'd bought with money earned from helping at the grocery store. "Very hungry," Lily admitted quietly. "Those men only gave me water." Jake unwrapped both sandwiches and handed Lily the bigger one. "Peanut butter and jelly. It's not fancy, but it's good." As Lily ate, Jake studied her in the dim light from the bridge above. Her clothes, though dirty now, were expensive. Her shoes were leather. Her hair was professionally cut. This wasn't a street kid like him. This was someone important, someone loved. "Lily," Jake said gently. "Where do you live? Where's your family?" "With my daddy," she replied, a tear rolling down her cheek. "He's probably so scared. I was going to school when those men took me." Jake moved closer, his protective instincts kicking in. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe now. Why are you helping me? Lily asked, turning her face toward his voice. You don't even know me. Jake was quiet for a moment. How could he explain that seeing her tied up in that basement had awakened something in him he'd buried after years of looking out only for himself? Because nobody helped me when I needed it, he finally said. And because you're just a kid. Kids should be protected. Lily's small hand reached out, finding Jake's arm. You're just a kid too. I stopped being a kid when I was 10, Jake replied, but his voice was gentler than usual. What happened when you were 10? My mom died. Had nobody else. Lily's grip on his arm tightened. I'm sorry. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the distant sound of traffic above. Jake had spent countless nights alone under this bridge. But tonight felt different. For the first time in 2 years, he wasn't completely alone. Jake. Lily's voice was sleepy. Yeah. Thank you for saving me. You're a good person. Jake smiled, the first real smile he'd managed in months. Get some sleep, Lily. Tomorrow, I'll figure out how to get you home. The next morning, Jake left Lily sleeping safely under the bridge while he went out to find food and information. The city was covered with missing person posters, and Jake's blood ran cold when he saw the face staring back at him from every telephone pole and store window. Missing, Lily Sterling, age 8. $15 million reward. Jake stared at the poster in shock. Lily Sterling, daughter of Robert Sterling, the richest man in Chicago. Jake had seen him on TV and in newspapers, always in expensive suits, always surrounded by important people. His first feeling was relief. At least now he knew where Lily belonged. But as he read the poster more carefully, something bothered him. The phone number for tips led to someone named David Martinez, not Lily's father directly. Jake spent the morning watching the Sterling mansion from far away, observing the constant flow of police cars and FBI vehicles. He needed to understand the situation before making his move. It was late afternoon when Jake's world shifted again. He was walking past an alley near the Preston warehouse when he heard familiar voices. The same men who had been guarding Lily. Boss says we got to move fast, one voice growled. The heat's getting too intense. What about the girl? The second man asked. David wants her eliminated. Says she might recognize him if she ever gets back to Daddy. Kid's blind, but she ain't deaf. She heard his voice that first day. Jake pressed himself against the brick wall, his heart hammering. David. The same name from the reward poster. Jake thought David was supposed to be helping find her. The first man laughed darkly. Guys playing both sides like a pro. Acts all concerned in front of Sterling while ordering us to clean up loose ends. Smart plan, really. Frame it as a kidnapping gone wrong. Console the grieving father, then step into his position at the company when Sterling falls apart. Jake's hands clenched into fists. This David person wasn't just involved in Lily's kidnapping. He was pretending to help her father while planning to kill her. When do we do it? Tonight. David said make it look like she tried to escape and got hurt. Then dump the body where it'll be found in a few days. Jake didn't wait to hear more. He ran back to the bridge, his mind racing. Lily was still in immediate danger, even though she was temporarily safe with him. But how could he get her back to her father without David finding out? How could he expose the truth when he was just a 12-year-old street kid that nobody would believe? Jake. Lily's voice was worried as he slid down the embankment. You sound scared. What's wrong? Jake knelt beside her, taking her hands gently. Lily, I need to ask you something important. The day you were taken, do you remember hearing any voices of people you might know? Lily's face scrunched up in concentration. There was one voice. Sounded familiar, like someone Daddy knows. But I was so scared I can't remember clearly. Jake's jaw tightened. Those men were right. Lily had heard David's voice. She was the only witness who could connect him to the crime, which made her a threat he couldn't afford to leave alive. Lily, Jake said firmly, I'm going to protect you, but we need to be very careful about who we trust. Jake spent the rest of the day making a plan. He couldn't simply walk up to the Sterling mansion and hand over Lily. Not when David might be there, ready to silence the only witness to his crime. But Lily needed to get back to her father soon. She was growing weaker from the stress and poor food. "Lily," Jake said gently as evening approached, "I'm going to take you somewhere safe tomorrow where you can see your daddy, but from a distance. I need to make sure it's completely safe before I bring you home." "Why wouldn't it be safe?" Lily asked, her small hand finding Jake's arm. "Daddy would never let anyone hurt me." Jake struggled with how much to tell her. She was only 8 and had already been through so much trauma. "Some of the people who took you are still out there. I want to be extra careful." The next morning, Jake helped Lily clean up as best they could with river water and spare clothes he'd managed to find. He'd seen announcements for a press conference at City Hall where Robert Sterling would make another public plea for information about his daughter. Jake positioned them across the street from City Hall, hidden behind a food truck, where Lily could hear clearly but they remained invisible in the crowd. At exactly 10 a.m., Robert Sterling emerged from a black SUV. Even from a distance, Jake could see the devastation on the man's face. His expensive suit hung loose on his frame, and his usually perfect appearance was disheveled from days of anguish. "Lily," Jake whispered, "your daddy's about to speak." The moment Robert's voice carried across the square through the microphone, Lily began to cry. "That's him. That's my daddy." Robert's voice broke as he spoke. "Lily, if you can hear this somehow, Daddy loves you. We're going to find you and bring you home. To whoever has my little girl, please. She's just an innocent child. She needs her medication. She needs to be home. I'll give you anything you want." Jake watched Lily's face crumble with longing and relief, but his attention was drawn to the man standing beside Robert. A tall, well-dressed man with graying hair who kept a supportive hand on Robert's shoulder. That had to be David Martinez. Jake studied David carefully, using the survival instincts that had kept him alive on the streets. While Robert was genuinely heartbroken, his grief raw and visible, David's expression seemed calculated. His concern appeared practiced, like an actor playing a role. "My business partner, David Martinez, has been coordinating search efforts around the clock," Robert continued. "We won't stop until Lily comes home." David stepped forward to the microphone. "We have teams covering every inch of this city. Lily, if you're out there, we're coming for you." Something cold settled in Jake's stomach. The way David said, "We're coming for you," didn't sound like a rescue promise. Sounded like a threat. After the press conference, Jake watched David interact with law enforcement and volunteers. The man was smooth, authoritative, helpful, but Jake noticed how his eyes constantly scanned the crowd as if looking for something. Or someone. "Jake," Lily whispered, tugging on his sleeve. "Can we go to Daddy now, please?" Jake's heart ached seeing her hope. "Soon, Lily. Promise. But I need to make sure of something first." "Make sure of what?" Jake looked back at David, who was now giving orders to search teams with the authority of someone in complete control. "I need to make sure the person who hurt you can't hurt you again." Jake knew he had one advantage over adults: invisibility. Street kids learned early how to blend into the background, how to observe without being noticed. Over the next 2 days, he made Lily as comfortable as possible under the bridge while he conducted his own investigation. David Martinez kept a predictable schedule. Every morning at 8 a.m., he left his downtown apartment. Jake followed him from a safe distance, using his knowledge of the city's alleyways and shortcuts to stay hidden. On the second day of watching, Jake's patience paid off. Instead of going to the Sterling Industries building, David drove to a run-down warehouse in the industrial district, the same area where Jake had originally found Lily. Jake watched from behind a dumpster as David met with 3 men, including the 2 he'd overheard planning Lily's murder. Money changed hands, and Jake strained to hear their conversation. "The search is getting too close to our operation," David said, his voice completely different from the caring tone he used around Robert. "We need to wrap this up tonight." "What about the girl?" one of the men asked. Jake's blood ran cold as David replied, "She's a liability. She heard my voice during the initial grab. Even though she's blind, she could identify me. Make it look like an accident. A fall, maybe. Something tragic that will devastate Sterling completely." And then David smiled, a cold expression that never appeared during his public appearances. "Then I'll be there to help poor Robert through his grief. I'll gradually take over more responsibilities at the company. Within 6 months, I'll control everything." Jake had heard enough. He carefully backed away from the warehouse, his mind racing. Not only was David planning to kill Lily, but he was orchestrating an elaborate scheme to steal her father's entire empire. The worst part was how perfectly it was working. Robert trusted David completely, relying on him to coordinate the search efforts. David had positioned himself as the hero while secretly being the villain. That afternoon, Jake returned to Lily with a heavy heart. She was weaker than before, and he could see she was fighting off a cold from sleeping rough. "Jake," she said softly as he slid down the embankment, "I had a dream about Daddy last night. He was calling for me, but I couldn't find him." Jake knelt beside her, his protective instincts stronger than ever. "Lily, I need to get you home tomorrow, but I have to ask you to be very brave." "Okay. I'm ready," she said with surprising strength. "I trust you." Jake spent the evening planning carefully. He couldn't just call the police. David had too much influence, and Jake was just a street kid with no credibility. He needed to get Lily safely to her father while simultaneously exposing David in a way that couldn't be ignored or covered up. As Lily slept fitfully beside him, Jake made his decision. Tomorrow he would take Lily directly to the Sterling mansion when he was certain David wasn't there. But he would also need to time it perfectly so that David would be caught in his lies. "Don't worry, Lily," Jake whispered into the darkness. "Tomorrow you're going home, and the person who hurt you is going to pay for what he did." Jake had been watching the Sterling mansion for 3 hours from across the street, hidden behind a large oak tree. He'd memorized the patterns, the guards' rotations, the delivery schedules, and most importantly, David's comings and goings. At 2 p.m., David left in his black car, heading toward downtown for what Jake had overheard him tell Robert was a meeting with federal investigators. Jake knew it was his window of opportunity. "Lily," Jake said gently, helping her to her feet. "It's time to go home." Lily had grown weaker over the past few days, but determination strengthened her voice. "I'm ready, Jake. Thank you for taking care of me." Jake had done his best to clean them both up. He'd used precious coins to buy soap and had washed their clothes in the river. Lily's school uniform was still stained and torn, but it was recognizable. Jake's own clothes, jeans with holes in the knees and a faded t-shirt, marked him clearly as what he was, a street kid. Hand in hand, they approached the mansion's imposing iron gates. The security guard, a large man in a crisp uniform, immediately stepped forward with a stern expression. "Hey kids, you can't be here. This is private property." "Please, sir," Jake said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I have Lily Sterling. I found her and I'm bringing her home." The guard's expression shifted to suspicion. "Right, kid. And I'm the president. Look, I know there's a reward, but we've had dozens of people trying to scam." "Daddy!" Lily suddenly screamed, her voice carrying across the estate grounds. "Daddy, I'm here." The sound was so piercing, so desperate that it cut through everything else. Within seconds, the mansion's front door burst open, and Robert Sterling came running, his face wild with hope and disbelief. "Lily! Lily!" Robert's voice cracked as he sprinted across the lawn, his expensive suit forgotten, his composure completely abandoned. The security guard stepped aside, his mouth falling open as he realized this wasn't a scam. Lily broke free from Jake's hand and ran toward her father's voice, stumbling slightly on the unfamiliar terrain. Robert caught her in his arms, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around, both of them sobbing. My beautiful baby," Robert wept, holding Lily so tightly it was as if he was trying to merge their hearts. "I thought I'd lost you forever. Daddy, I knew you'd find me," Lily cried, her small arms wrapped around his neck. "I knew you wouldn't give up." For several minutes, Jake stood quietly to the side, watching the reunion with a mixture of joy and something like envy. He'd never experienced that kind of love, that desperate relief, that complete devotion. Finally, Robert looked up at Jake through his tears. The man who commanded boardrooms and controlled billions looked at the 12-year-old street kid with an expression of pure gratitude. "You brought her back to me," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "How can I ever repay you? The reward money. Anything you want. Name it." Jake shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of how out of place he looked in this world of marble and luxury. "I don't want the reward money, sir." Robert blinked in surprise. "Then what? What can I give you?" Jake looked down at his worn sneakers, then back up at Robert with complete honesty. "Just a plate of food, sir. I haven't eaten much lately." Robert's chef had prepared a feast that Jake could never have imagined. The dining room table was covered with roasted chicken, fresh bread, vegetables, and desserts that looked like works of art. Jake ate slowly, savoring every bite while Lily sat beside him, her hand occasionally touching his arm to reassure herself he was still there. "Jake," Robert said, watching the boy with growing amazement, "Lily told me you've been taking care of her for days. You kept her safe, fed her, protected her. You're a hero." Jake shook his head, uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Robert said firmly. "Most people would have called the police immediately and collected the reward. You put her safety first, even when it meant risk for yourself." Lily turned toward Jake's voice. "Daddy, Jake saved me from very bad men. They were going to hurt me, but Jake was brave and got me out." Robert's expression darkened. "What men?" "The FBI said they hadn't found any trace of your captors." Before Jake could answer, the dining room door burst open. David Martinez strode in, his face flushed with apparent relief and joy. "Robert, I just heard the news from security. Lily's back." David moved toward Lily with open arms. "Thank God you're safe, sweetheart." Jake's fork clattered to his plate. Every muscle in his body tensed as he stared at David, the same man he'd watched planning Lily's murder just hours earlier. Lily shrank back against Jake instinctively. Something in David's voice triggered a memory, a flash of recognition that made her grip Jake's sleeve tightly. "And you must be the young man who found her," David said, turning to Jake with a practiced smile. "The whole city owes you a debt of gratitude." Jake stood up slowly, his young face set with determination. Robert noticed the change immediately. The easygoing boy from moments before had transformed into someone older, harder. "Lily," Jake said quietly, never taking his eyes off David, "is this the voice you heard? The familiar one from when you were taken?" Lily's breath caught. Her unseeing eyes widened as the memory came flooding back. "Yes," she whispered. "That's the voice. He was there when they grabbed me." The dining room fell into shocked silence. David's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before he forced out a laugh. "That's ridiculous. The poor child is confused, traumatized. Robert, surely you don't believe." "It was him," Jake's voice rang out with absolute certainty. "He's the one who ordered your daughter's kidnapping, Mr. Sterling. I saw him meeting with the men who held Lily. I heard him planning to kill her." Robert stared at his business partner and best friend, the man he'd trusted with his life, his business, and his daughter's rescue. "David, this is insane. Tell me this isn't true." David's composure cracked slightly. "Robert, think about this logically. A street kid and a traumatized child making accusations. I've been coordinating the search efforts. I've been by your side every moment." "Because you wanted to control the investigation," Jake shot back. "You planned the whole thing to steal Mr. Sterling's company. You said when Lily died, he'd fall apart and you'd take over everything." The words hung in the air like a sword. Robert's face went white, then red with rage as he looked between Jake's determined expression and David's increasingly panicked one. "David," Robert said, his voice deadly quiet, "look me in the eye and tell me you had nothing to do with taking my daughter." David Martinez stared into Robert Sterling's eyes. Eyes that had trusted him completely for 20 years. Eyes that now burned with a father's fury and a friend's betrayal. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. "Robert," David began, his voice less steady than before, "you're letting a street kid and a confused child destroy our friendship. I've been your partner, your brother." "Then prove it," Robert interrupted, stepping closer. "Look me in the eye and swear on everything you hold sacred that you had no part in Lily's disappearance." Jake watched David's face carefully. He'd learned to read adults on the streets, to spot the liars and predators. Right now he could see David calculating, weighing his options, looking for an escape route. David started, then stopped. His perfectly groomed appearance was beginning to crack. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His hands trembled slightly. Lily suddenly spoke, her voice small but clear. "He told them to make me disappear forever. Remember now. He said I was a problem that needed to be solved." "That's enough," David exploded, his careful mask finally slipping completely. "You want the truth, Robert." "Fine. Yes, I planned it. Yes, I took your precious daughter." Robert staggered backward as if physically struck. "Why, David? Why would you? We're family." "Family?" David laughed bitterly, years of resentment pouring out. "You mean the way you treated me like your little brother who could never quite measure up? Always Robert's brilliant ideas, Robert's company, Robert's success. While I did the real work in the shadows." Jake moved protectively closer to Lily, who was trembling at the anger in David's voice. "The board was ready to promote me to equal partner," David continued, his composure completely shattered. "But you blocked it, didn't you? Said I wasn't ready for that level of responsibility. After 20 years. So you decided to murder my daughter." Robert's voice was deadly quiet, more terrifying than any shout. "The plan was perfect," David said, his voice taking on a manic edge. "Lily disappears. You fall apart with grief. The board loses confidence in your leadership. I step in as interim CEO, then permanent. Nobody gets hurt permanently. Well, except Lily, but that was unfortunately necessary." Robert's hands clenched into fists. "You were going to kill an 8-year-old child for a company. For my company. My company!" David screamed. "I built that empire as much as you did. I deserved." His words were cut off as Robert grabbed him by the collar, his billionaire composure replaced by primal fury. "You lying, murdering—" "No, Daddy!" Lily cried out, sensing the violence in the room. Jake quickly pulled out his phone, a cheap device he'd bought for emergencies. "I recorded everything," he announced, causing both men to freeze. "The meetings at the warehouse, the plans to kill Lily, all of it. I've got evidence." David's face went ashen. "Robert!" A new voice interrupted. Detective Santos stood in the doorway with 2 uniformed officers, having been called by the mansion security when they heard the shouting. "Is everything all right here?" Robert released David but didn't step back. "Detective, I'd like to report a kidnapping conspiracy. David Martinez orchestrated my daughter's abduction." "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Sterling." Jake stepped forward. "I have recordings of him planning to murder Lily. And Lily can identify his voice from the kidnapping." Detective Santos looked at David, who was now slumped against the wall. His expensive suit wrinkled, his face hollow. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us for questioning." As the handcuffs clicked around David's wrists, he looked back at Robert one last time. "You'll regret this, Robert. Without me, your empire will crumble." Robert put his arms around Lily and Jake, pulling them both close. "My empire was never worth my daughter's life. And thanks to Jake's courage, I still have what matters most." 3 months later, the courthouse steps were lined with reporters and photographers as Robert, Lily, and Jake arrived for David Martinez's trial. Jake had slowly begun adjusting to his new life in the Sterling mansion. Living there felt surreal. Jake had his own room, larger than any space he'd ever inhabited, with a bed so comfortable he sometimes lay awake just appreciating its softness. Mrs. Rodriguez, the housekeeper, had become like a grandmother, making sure he ate properly and teaching him manners with infinite patience. But today, Jake had to face the hardest part of his new reality, testifying against David in open court. "Are you ready for this?" Robert asked, straightening Jake's new suit, the first formal clothing Jake had ever owned. "I think so," Jake replied, though his hands were trembling slightly. "What if he tries to make me look bad? What if people don't believe me?" Lily reached for Jake's hand. "We believe you. That's all that matters." Inside the courtroom, David sat at the defendant's table, his expensive legal team surrounding him. When Jake entered, David's eyes fixed on him with cold hatred. When Jake was called to testify, Robert squeezed his shoulder encouragingly. "Just tell the truth, son. That's all you need to do." Jake walked to the witness stand, his heart pounding. The prosecutor, Ms. Rodriguez, smiled kindly at him. "Jake, can you tell the court what you witnessed at the warehouse on that day?" Jake's voice started quietly but grew stronger as he recounted everything. The conversations he'd overheard, David's cold instructions to kill Lily, the callous way he'd discussed stealing Robert's company. David's defense attorney tried to discredit Jake during cross-examination. "Isn't it true, Jake, that you're a homeless child with a history of theft? Why should this court believe the word of a street criminal?" Jake felt his face burn with shame. But then he looked at Robert and Lily in the gallery. Their faces were filled with love and support, not judgment. "Yes, sir, I lived on the streets," Jake said clearly. "And yes, I've stolen food when I was starving. But I've never lied about something this important. I recorded what I heard because I knew a little girl's life was in danger." The courtroom was silent. Even the defense attorney seemed taken aback by Jake's honest dignity. When the recordings were played for the jury, David's voice filled the courtroom with cold calculation as he planned Lily's murder. Several jurors looked disgusted. The verdict came quickly. Guilty on all charges. David Martinez was sentenced to life in prison. As the judge's gavel fell, Robert put his arms around Jake and Lily. "It's over," he whispered. "He can't hurt anyone anymore." Outside the courthouse, Robert knelt before Jake one more time. "Jake, you've shown incredible courage today. You've helped ensure that a dangerous man will never hurt another child. I'm proud to call you my son." "Son." Jake's voice cracked with emotion. "If you'll have me as your father, what do you say we make this official?" Jake nodded, tears flowing freely. "Yes, sir. I'd be honored to be your son." 6 months later, the family court judge's chambers felt warm and welcoming. Sunlight streamed through tall windows as Robert, Lily, and Jake sat together before Judge Patricia Williams. "This is one of my favorite parts of being a judge," Judge Williams said with a genuine smile. "Today, we're not here to determine guilt or innocence, but to celebrate the creation of a family." Jake sat between Robert and Lily, wearing his best suit, his hair neatly combed. The nervous boy who had once hidden under bridges was still there, but he was growing into someone new, someone who belonged. "Jake Williams," Judge Williams continued, "you've shown extraordinary courage and character. Mr. Sterling has petitioned to adopt you as his son, and from everything I've read in these files, this is exactly where you belong." She picked up the official documents. "Jake, do you understand what adoption means?" "Yes, ma'am," Jake replied, his voice steady. "It means I'll have a real family. Forever." "That's right. Robert Sterling will legally become your father, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. You'll be Jake Sterling if you choose to take his name." Jake looked at Robert, who nodded encouragingly. "Jake Sterling," Jake said, testing how it sounded. "I like it." "And Lily," the judge addressed the 8-year-old, How do you feel about having Jake as your official big brother? Lily beamed, reaching for Jake's hand. He already is my big brother. He saved my life. Now it's just on paper too. Judge Williams signed the final documents with a flourish. Then by the power vested in me by the state of Illinois, I hereby grant this petition for adoption. Jake, welcome to your new family. Robert stood and embraced Jake tightly. Welcome home, son. The Sterling Academy for Disadvantaged Youth was Robert's newest project, funded entirely by Sterling Industries. The gleaming building stood in the heart of Chicago's South Side, offering education, job training, and support services to homeless and at-risk children. Jake, now 13 and thriving in his new life, had insisted on being involved in every aspect of the planning. He walked through the halls with Robert and the architects, pointing out details that only someone who had lived on the streets would think of. The lockers need to be bigger, Jake explained to the contractor. Kids who don't have homes keep everything they own with them. They need space for their belongings. And the cafeteria, he continued, needs to serve breakfast and dinner too, not just lunch. Some kids won't have eaten anything else that day. Robert watched his son with pride. Jake had not only survived the streets, but his experiences had given him wisdom far beyond his years. He was becoming an advocate for children who were still living the life he had escaped. The first graduating class will be small, Robert told Jake as they stood in the empty auditorium. About 20 kids. That's 20 kids who get a chance they wouldn't have had otherwise, Jake replied. That matters. Lily appeared in the doorway, her guide dog, a golden retriever named Hope, leading her confidently through the unfamiliar space. She had grown taller and more confident over the past year, her trauma healing in the safety of her restored family. Daddy Jake, she called out, Mrs. Rodriguez says dinner's ready, and you promised we'd work on my science project tonight. Jake grinned. Coming, sis. What's the project this week? The solar system. I'm building a model where I can feel the different planet sizes and textures. As they walked home together, Robert in his tailored suit, Lily with her guide dog, and Jake in his school uniform, they looked like what they had become, a family that had found each other against all odds. Jake Sterling, now 18, stood at the podium in the Sterling Academy auditorium, looking out at an audience filled with business leaders, politicians, and journalists. But his eyes found the faces that mattered most, Robert and Lily in the front row, beaming with pride. 5 years ago, Jake began, his voice clear and confident, I was living under a bridge, stealing food to survive, invisible to the world around me. I thought I was worthless, that my life didn't matter to anyone. He paused, looking at his family. Then I met a scared little girl who needed help, and everything changed. Not just because I helped her, but because helping her taught me that we all have value, we all have something to contribute. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. The Sterling Academy has graduated over 200 students in 5 years. Former homeless kids who are now doctors, teachers, entrepreneurs, and community leaders. We didn't just give them food and shelter. We gave them hope and the tools to build their own futures. Jake gestured to a section of the audience where dozens of young adults sat, all former Academy students. Maria Rodriguez, who lived in her car with her mother for 3 years, just finished her nursing degree. Tommy Chen, who aged out of foster care with nowhere to go, opened his own restaurant last month. Sarah Johnson, who survived abuse and homelessness, is now a social worker helping other kids who are living the life she escaped. The applause was thunderous, but Jake wasn't finished. Today, I'm announcing the expansion of the Sterling Academy model to 10 more cities across the country. But more than that, I'm announcing my own next step. Robert leaned forward, curious. Jake hadn't told him about this part of his speech. This fall, I'll be starting at Northwestern University, studying social work and public policy. My goal is to spend my life creating opportunities for kids who society has forgotten. Kids like I used to be. The standing ovation lasted several minutes. When it died down, Jake spoke one final time. 6 years ago, a man I now call Dad taught me that heroism isn't about being perfect or powerful. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard, even when no one is watching. Today, I want to challenge everyone in this room to be that kind of hero for a child who needs you. As Jake left the podium, Robert met him with tears in his eyes. I am so proud of you, son. Lily hugged Jake tightly. You're going to change so many lives, just like you changed ours. Jake looked at his family. His real family, forged not by blood but by love, sacrifice, and shared purpose. We all saved each other, he said simply. That's what families do. The bronze statue stood in the center of Sterling Memorial Park, depicting a young boy reaching out his hand to help a smaller child. The inscription read, "In memory of all the street heroes who choose courage over comfort, compassion over indifference." Jake Sterling, now 28 and director of the National Sterling Foundation, stood with his wife Sarah, the former homeless girl he'd mentioned in his speech years ago, and their 2 young children. Robert, now 68 but still energetic, pushed Lily's daughter on the playground swings nearby. Lily, now a successful children's book author whose stories taught empathy and inclusion, approached with her husband and family. Hard to believe it's been over 10 years since that night under the bridge, she said, taking Jake's arm. Sometimes I still dream about it, Jake admitted. But they're good dreams now. Dreams about second chances and the power of choosing to help instead of walking away. A group of teenagers from the newest Sterling Academy walked past, laughing and talking, their backpacks full of homework and hope. One of them, a girl about 14, looked remarkably like Jake had at that age, thin, wary, but with determined eyes. "Mr. Sterling," she called out, "thank you for the scholarship interview yesterday. I want to be a teacher someday, help other kids like me." Jake smiled. "Keep working hard, Maria. The world needs more teachers who understand what it's like to struggle." As the sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Jake reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a frightened child hiding under a bridge to a man who had helped thousands of other children find their own paths to hope. He had learned that heroes weren't born in mansions or created in boardrooms. They were forged in moments of choice. The choice to help instead of hurt, to include instead of ignore, to love instead of abandon. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, those heroic choices led you home. "Ready to go home?" Robert asked, gathering his family around him. Jake looked at the faces of the people he loved most in the world. His father, who had chosen to see potential instead of problems. His sister, who had taught him about courage in the face of fear. His wife, who understood the journey from survival to success, and his children, who would grow up knowing they were loved unconditionally. "Yeah, Dad," Jake said, putting his arm around Robert's shoulders. "Let's go home." As they walked away together, the statue remained, reminding everyone who passed that heroism comes in all sizes, from all backgrounds, and that sometimes the most powerful person in any story is the one who chooses to help when they could easily walk away. The street hero had found his home, but more importantly, he had spent his life making sure other lost children could find theirs too.